Hi everyone, how you going? So I think I found something important here, so I'm just going to get right into it. I was looking up uh, the synagogue of the Herodians in Rome, and they think there may have been a synagogue that belonged to the Herodians or was part of the Herodian political party family. It says the synagogue of the Herodians. Among the inscriptions of the Jewish catacomb in Vigna Ragdinini, Appian Way in Rome, Father G. Garucci found less than 70 years ago a fragment which reads as follows, and it's in Greek. Scholars were quick to recognize in the first line the remnant of the word, again in Greek. The second line was less obvious, for although the name of several synagogues in Rome had been revealed by the inscriptions, there was none similar to this. Garucci himself interpreted it as referring to the synagogue of the Rhodians, presumably a community of Jews who originally from the island of Rhodes. Emil Schurer accepted the reference to a synagogue of the Rhodians, but threw out the suggestion that the Greek name might be for, starting with a H, since was sometime written for in these inscriptions. This might be a reference to a synagogue of the Herodians, apparently so named in honor of King Herod. Abraham Berliner, author of A History of Jews in Rome, while including the synagogue of the Rhodians in his list of synagogues, repeated Schurer's suggestion of a synagogue of the Herodians. Now, it goes on to talk about Nicholas Mueller, the most prominent explorer of the Jewish catacombs, who unhappily died in 1912 before he could complete his study, reverted to the synagogue of the Herodians, and using the name of this synagogue as a parallel, argued that the synagogue of the Agrippesians, which was usually understood as having been named for Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, was actually named for the Jewish king Agrippa I or Agrippa II. So this was the synagogue of the Agrippesians. So he was to be the patron of this synagogue. Now there's some really weird stuff that comes up around Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa and King Agrippa I. So Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa was a Roman general, statesman, and architect who was a close friend and son-in-law and lieutenant to the Roman Emperor Augustus. Now we know that the Herods had close relationships with the Caesars. They grew up with them, they were educated with them, and we have Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, who was said to be of an equestrian family. Early life and family: Agrippa was born around 63 BC in an uncertain location. His father was called Lucius Vipsanius. His mother's name was not known, and Pliny the Elder claimed that his cognomen Agrippa derived from him having been born breech. So it's possible that she died in childbirth. Pliny also stated that he suffered from lameness as a child. He had an elder brother whose name was Lucius Vipsanius and a sister named Vipsania Pola. Now this Pola name we know is linked to Vespasian, Vespasian's mother, and her father was a Herod. I've shown that in my other videos how the Pola name is linked to Herod of Chalcis, Herod Polio he was named. And ironically, there's a lot of weird similarities between Vespasian's mother and the daughter of Herod of Chalcis, Chalcis, never know how to say that. He was the brother of Herod Agrippa I. So isn't that strange that Herod Agrippa I was the brother of Herod of Chalcis, or Chalcis, and Marcus Agrippa had a sister named Polio. And we know that Herod of Chalcis was Herod Polio. So the equites, literally horse or cavalrymen, though sometimes referred to as knights in English, constituted the second of the property-based classes of ancient Rome, ranking below the senatorial class, a member of the equestrian order was known as an equus. So here's the analysis of Roman centuriate organization. So we have this class system of Rome. It's the patricians. It was via hereditary. The equites were knights. Then you have so they're the aristocrats. Then we have the commoners, first class, second class, third class, fourth class, and so on. So in this website here about Roman betrothal and marriage, if we scroll down, class issues. Roman had a rigid and patriarchal class system, and ideal marriages took place between those of the same ancestral class. Patrician to patrician and plebeian to plebeian. However, interclass marriages could be advantageous, and in 445 BC, the 12-table law prohibiting marriage between patrician and plebeian was repealed. Union between wealthy plebeian families and impoverished patricians could confer a rise in status for the plebeian side and cash for the patrician element. Children of such a union inherited the social status of the father. The famous Roman general Gaius Marius was born into a wealthy equestrian family, a rank defined by wealth rather than ancestry, and was thus considered novus homo, or a new man. Marriage into the impoverished patrician Julian family to Julia, the aunt of Julius Caesar, gave him respectability and gave the Julians much needed money. Now, in my past videos, I've talked about how the Herodian family seems to have married into the Julian family, and when you follow the Fab Pedigree website, you can see how these families link up. So if we look at Antipater the Idumean, this is the father of Herod the Great, says when Julius Caesar defeated Pompey, Antipater rescued Caesar in Alexandria and was made chief minister of Judea, as Judea became known to the Romans with the right to collect taxes. Antipater eventually made his sons Phasaelus and Herod the governors of Jerusalem and Galilee, respectively. After the assassination of Caesar, Antipater was forced to side with Gaius Cassius Longinus against Mark Antony. The pro-Roman politics of Antipater led to his increasing unpopularity among the devout non-Hellenized Jews. He died by poison. So, we're looking at this other website saying that the equestrian rank with money, there's no doubt the Herods would have had money and gold. They were from Nabatea. Antipater's wife was a Nabatean princess who gave birth to Herod the Great. He was part Idumean, part Nabatean. I dare say that the Nabateans and the Idumeans by that time were practically the same people. They were of an Arabic origin and an Edomite origin. But later on in the video, I'm going to show that they may originally have had a Chaldean origin. And they resided in Petra. That was a major trading city on the Spice Road that went from India up to Saudi Arabia, then up to Babylon. The Babylonians had trade agreements with the Edomites or the Idumeans when the southern kingdom was exiled to Babylon. We see in Psalms 137, verse 7, remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. The Edomites took possession of the land in Jerusalem in the southern kingdom. So according to the New World Encyclopedia, it talks about relations with Israel and Edom. When Israel divided into two kingdoms, Edom became a dependency of the kingdom of Judah. In the time of Jehoshaphat, which was 914 BC, I've been reminded not to add the E before Common Era because it's before Christ, and I keep forgetting to do that. The Bible mentions a king of Edom, 2 Kings 3:9-26, who made common cause with Israel and Judah against Moab and met with the prophet Elisha. A miracle ensured relieving their drought-stricken armies with a flood of water, the color of blood flowing from the direction of Edom. However, in 2 Chronicles 10-23 reports significant rebellion against Jehoshaphat, consisting of forces from Edom, Ammon, and Moab. So remember, Moab married Ishmael, the son of Abraham. Ammon and Moab were both Canaanite people. Through God's intervention, the invaders eventually turned against one another, thus failing in their plan. Edom also revolted in the time of King Jehoram of Judah, mid-9th century BC, and elected a king of its own, 2 Kings 8:20-22 and 2 Chronicles 21:8. The writer of Kings reports that to this day Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Jehoram's son Amaziah attacked and defeated the Edomites, seizing Selah, 2 Kings 14:7 and 2 Chronicles 25:11-1. However, it would not be until the 2nd century BC that Edom came completely under Jewish rule. In the time of Nebuchadnezzar II, Edomites helped plunder Jerusalem and slaughter the Jews in Psalms 137:7 and Obad 11-14. For this reason, the later prophets denounced Edom violently. The Edomites were held in contempt by many Israelites, hence the book of Psalms takes a very different view than does Deuteronomy towards the Edomites, portraying God as saying, "Moab is my washpot, over Edom will I cast out my shoot." Psalm 68 and 108-9. So the kingdom of Edom drew much of its livelihood from the caravan trades between Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, and southern Arabia. Along the incense route, astride the King's Highway, the Edomites were one of several states in a region for whom trade was vital due to the scarcity of arable land. Edom's location on the southern highlands left it with only a small strip of land that received sufficient rain for farming. In fact, consistent with the Song of Deborah, emphasis on Yahweh's role in providing rain from Seir. Edom probably exported salt and balsam used for perfume and temple incense in the ancient world from the Dead Sea region. In the time of Amaziah, 838 BC, Salah Petra was the principal stronghold, 2 Kings 14-7, while Elat and Ezion Geber were its seaports. So they also traded bitumen from the Dead Sea region, which was profitable for them. So Edom is mentioned in Assyrian cuneiform inscriptions in the form Udumi or Udumu at the time of Esarhaddon, 680 BC. According to the Egyptian inscriptions, the Aduma, and that would come from the word Adam, meaning red, and we know that Esau was red, at times extended their possessions to the borders of Egypt. After the conquest of Judah, the Babylonians, the Edomites were allowed to settle of Judah by the Babylonians. The Edomites were allowed to settle in the region south of Hebron. They prospered in this new country called by the Greeks and Romans Idumea for more than 4 centuries. At this time, they were driven by the Nabateans from their ancestral lands to the south and east. I just want to add a reminder here that, Esau was red. He had red hair all over him. Aduma this word is from Adam, which means red or ruddy. And Edom was known as red. I want to put in here about the dragons of the wilderness. Malachi 1:3-4. And I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. So we have Tanan, appears in the Baal cycle as one of the servants of Yam. He was the sea, defeated by Baal, Lord, or bound by his sister Anat. He is usually depicted as a serpentine, possibly with a double tail. Tannin was a sea monster in Canaanite and Hebrew mythology used as a symbol of chaos and evil. Revelation 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. We know that this child's the Messiah, so it's Jesus. Obviously, the woman is his mother. Symbolically, it's the Messiah and Israel giving birth to the Messiah, but in reality, it was Jesus and Mary. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns with 7 crowns upon his head. Symbolically, I think this dragon represents Canaanite. I think it represents Edom. Why? Because it's a red dragon, and literally this dragon represents King Herod. Why is it King Herod? Because the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Who tried to murder Jesus as soon as he was born? King Herod. The dragon also drew a third part of the stars of heaven. Who destroyed Jerusalem? We know that it was Vespasian, the Emperor Vespasian. Now, if Vespasian was a Herod, and there's evidence to show that he was, it's the red dragon people that drew a third part of the stars of heaven, because we know that Israel is considered a third. Israel is a third, along with Egypt and Assyria. It says that in the Bible. And cast them to the earth. It cast them out into the nations, into the people of the nations. And what happens later in this story? The woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared of God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So we see that Israel, the woman, the third that was drawn and cast out into the earth, she flees into the wilderness and she's fed there. But the dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast into the earth and his angels were cast out with him. So what happened at the time of the fall of Jerusalem? The Herods were cast out of the temple. They were cast out as being rulers of Jerusalem and Judea. They were cast into the earth. They fled to Rome. Then we see later in Revelation that the woman comes out of the wilderness riding the beast, which would be Roman, and the beast is controlled by the dragon. The dragons of the wilderness, I believe, are Canaanite, and the red dragon is Herod. It's red because it's Esau, it's Edom. But, Edom is Canaanite. I mean, we have Esau, who was a Hebrew via Abraham, and ever since then they've been marrying the Canaanites, so they're barely related to the Israelites of Jacob anymore. So here I have a paper written by Jason Dykhouse from the South Texas School of Christian Studies. It says it's about biblical evidence from Obadiah and Psalms 137:4, an Edomite treaty betrayal of Judah in the 6th century BCE during the Babylonian crisis, 588 to 586 BC, after setting a context that includes the use of treaties in the ancient Near East to establish expectations for political relationships and the likelihood that Edom could operate as a political entity in the Judahite Negev during the Babylonian assault. Terminological parallels evidence an Edomite treaty betrayal of Judah. Moreover, the study shows that Obadiah is replete with treaty allusions. The study of Psalms 137 in comparison with Aramaic treaty text from Sephir reveals that the difficult psalm also evidences a treaty betrayal by Edom and includes elements appropriate for treaty curses. The article closes with a discussion of piecemeal data from a few other biblical texts, a criticism of the view that Edom was innocent during the Babylonian crisis, and a suggestion that the treaty betrayal may have contributed to the production of some anti-Edom biblical material. So did have another paper in one of my other videos that showed archaeological evidence of Edomites taking over the fortified cities or towns along the trading routes that were once run by Judah. Basically, it's saying this article argues that Obadiah and Psalms 137 evidence in Edomite treaty betrayal of Judah during the Babylonian assault on Judah, 588 to 586 BC. Archaeological and epigraphic evidence for Edomite involvement in the fall of Judah is limited, yet the evidence we do have may be read as congruent with Edomite hostility at the time. The focus here is on biblical evidence and some summary statements on the historical context of the Negev, where both Judah and Edom exerted some influence in the early 6th century BC, is necessary given the state of affairs in the study of Edom. First, it appears that during the 7th century, Edom and Judah, along with the caravanners and local pastoralists and agriculturalists, were in a mutually beneficial economic cooperative or trade route facilitation under Assyrian supervision. So the Assyrians took the northern kingdom. It is questionable that Edom had been aggressively encroaching upon the Judahite Negev. Judahite fortifications along the Beersheba Valley might help deter an invasion, but their more regular function may have been to protect, administer, and benefit from international trade route commerce. In this view, whatever Edomite forces were in the Negev prior to the Babylonian assault on Judah were likely ones escorting trade caravans and protecting other local interests. Second, the geopolitical problem of an Edomite-Judahite border during the Babylonian crisis boils down to a question of Edomite and Judahite geopolitical domain, control and range, direct influence. In the Negev, where did the southern Judahite domain terminate? What was Edom's effective political range? Was Edom in a geopolitical position to assist Babylon in Judah's destruction? To what extent do Edomite artifactual remains found in the Negev and Beersheba Valley evidence an Edomite presence? In the context of a cultural milieu of various tribal subgroups and international trade in and around Beersheba Valley, it has been argued that the Edomite wares would have functioned at least as status symbol to communicate and socially protect the ethnic identity of its users. Groups with an Edomite cultural orientation, given the distribution of Edomite wares in context of its international trade. It is likely that some of these groups had a history of cooperation, if not alliance, to Edom. I see little reason to doubt that at least some of these groups would self-identify as Edomite. Accordingly, in a context of the Babylon assault threatening Judah militarily, Edom's direct trade network experience and intertribal administrative, logistical, and military capabilities and allegiances could have allowed Edom the opportunity to assume greater operational control of Beersheba Valley. It is not unreasonable that parts of the valley could have been taken by force. Of course, any claim made on such control by Edom subsequent to the fall of Judah in 586 BC would likely require Babylonian approval, likely as part of a treaty relationship. Now, in the other article I had, they had archaeological evidence that these fortifications were run by the Edomites due to idols that were found and pottery. We know that Edom took over the region of Judah during the Babylonian exile. So therefore they were allowed by the Babylonians into this region. It says here, Obadiah 7 and the language of alliance. Obadiah extended inverted quotations has ended with verse 7, overt reference to a broken international alliance begin. Three terms likely synonymous with treaty are found in Obad 7a, men of your covenant, men of your peace, your bread. While the first two phases are readily at home in treaty discourse, the same may be said of eating in treaty context, suggests the kinship relations, intimacy, security, and perhaps economic incentive of the established relationship. Additionally, your bread in Obad 7 might reflect a specific treaty ratification meal. In either case, the term expresses the whole of the treaty. So it seems that Edom, according to Obadiah, entered a treaty with Babylon against Judah. So getting back to the Herods and Roman marriage, we can see that Herod Antipater, the Idumean, was quite wealthy and influential, and he saved Julius Caesar, then sided with Gaius Cassius Longinus against Mark Antony after Caesar was murdered. Is it possible that through these alliances, the Herod family married into the Roman aristocracy and the Roman families of who became Caesars? I think it's highly likely due to the wealth of the Herods and due to the relationship that they have after Herod the Great. All of Herod the Great's children were educated with the Caesars and grew up with them in the same home as them. It's not too hard to believe that the Herod women were married off to the Caesars. And, when we look at Antipater the Idumean, he had more children than just Herod. He had Faisal, Pheroras, and Salome. Now, through Salome's line, it's quite possible that her children were married into Roman aristocracy. He was married to, his first marriage was to a sister of Mariamne, the wife of Herod. So she was one of the Judean royalty, Mariamne. She was Hasmonean, which marriage was allegedly arranged by Herod. His wife died. Herod betrothed him to his eldest daughter by Mariamne, Salampsio. But because of the affection for a slave girl by whose charms he was overcome, he rejected the marriage. Some time later, Herod asked him to marry Salampsio's younger sister, Cypros. And at first, Pheroras agreed, but later again he refused and stayed married to his wife, who was very unpopular with Herod. So we don't know if Pheroras had children, but Faisal, Herod's other brother, did have children. He had a son also named Faisal. It says Josephus speaks of Faisal as a brave noble man, his son who likewise bore the name Faisal and seems to have married Herod's daughter Salampsio, by whom he had 5 children. Son of Herod by his concubine Pallas was called Faisal by Herod, who likewise honored his brother's memory by naming a city northeast of Jericho Phasalis, and a tower of his palace at Jerusalem Phasalis. So, 5 children. So there's more Herods that are not recorded in history. So we have Herod the Great, Faisal, Pheroras, and Salome all had children, all probably married into Roman elite. I can't prove it, but I can prove that Herod the Great's children did and were educated in Rome. It's quite possible that these children's children lived in Rome. Another weird phenomenon online is this bust of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. And we have this image here of his bust. If we scroll down, here's another one of him, Marcus Agrippa. It's the same face, same person. We can see that that's the same image, same look. I don't know if it's because people are confused, but they seem to be using this same bust for Herod Agrippa as well as Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. I can't seem to find the source of the original bust, but, I think people might be confused. It says Herod Agrippa I. That's clearly the same bust that's used for Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. And they're also using the same bust for Caligula from Herod Antipas. So here they got Herod Agrippa, grandson of Herod the Great, here, which is the same as the one for Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. And this bust here saying Herod Antipas is actually a bust of Caligula. So this is a coin from Herod Agrippa I. And if we look at this image here, it actually does look a lot like the bust image. Here's another coin, still quite similar to the bust. So in the Jewish encyclopedia, Herod Antipas was the youngest son of Herod the Great by his Samaritan wife Malthace. Says Antipas, like most of the other members of his family, was educated in Rome and kept in close touch with the imperial court. Little is known of the mode of life of his activity before his ascension to power, though his later acts do not lead to the supposition that he had been superior in virtue to his half-brothers, or indeed to most of the patrician youths brought up near the palace. So these people really have 6 degrees or even closer degrees of separation. It says the Jewish king Herod the Great had many sons, and one of them was Aristobulus. However, the prince and the king were not on speaking terms. After 2 trials before the Roman Emperor Augustus, Herod had his son executed in 7 BC. Aristobulus' son Agrippa, named after Augustus' friend Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, was spared. Well, was he named after him? Or was he him? The boy was only 3 years old. He was born in 11 and was sent to Rome, where he received a Roman education with the princes of the ruling dynasty, the Julio-Claudians. Among his companions were the late emperors Caligula and Claudius. So Herod Agrippa grew up with Caligula. Back here it says that Antipas was educated in Rome, like the other members of his family. So if Herod Agrippa was educated and grew up with Caligula, then so did Antipas. People are becoming confused and using Caligula's image as Antipas. This here is a coin of Herod Antipas. So I want to get back to the synagogue of Rodan, and I'm finding similarities in this name, Radhan. Now, my previous video about the other channels bringing up about the Radhanite Jews. Radhan is an area of Mesopotamia or Iraq, modern day Iraq. It says Radhan was a region of south central Mesopotamia, Iraq in the early Middle Ages. It was an administrative district under the Abbasids and also a diocese of the Church of the East. It is also known to have had a Jewish population and was probably the country of origin of the Radhanite merchants. The name, however, does not appear in any Hebrew text. The exact location of Radhan is not certain, but it was not far from Baghdad. It may have been roughly the same as the area known since the late Middle Ages as Suad, a fertile territory southeast of Baghdad on the eastern bank of the Tigris. Other authorities place it north of Baghdad, still east of the Tigris, or further south of Baghdad and west of the Tigris in the region of Meishan. So the spelling Radhan reflects the Arabic. In one Arabic source, it's Radan. In Syriac and Christian Arabic sources, the term is usually singular. In early Islamic sources, however, the plural from Radhanat and a dual form of Radhanan are more common. They probably reflect the division of the territory into either a lower, middle, or upper part, or just a lower and upper part, respectively. Theodore Noldeki argued that the name was Assyrian origin and gave its hypothetical Assyrian form as Rada'anu. The Syriac sources Radan is identical to the region called Jukha in Arabic. So, according to Jewish Virtual Library, Redania, it says here that the name Redania, as recorded by Ibn Karadadiba and Redania by Ibn al-Faqih, has been customary to explain the later form as Persian from Radan, meaning knowing the way. But it is not certainly the more original. Other suggestions have been that the name is connected with Latin Rodanus, Okay, that's interesting, because when we go back to the synagogue of the Herodians, it's called in Latin the Rhodians and the Herodians. Is this a link in etymology? So the Rhodians, is that another name for the Herodians? Or was the synagogue of the Rhodians a synagogue for people in Rome who were part of these Rhodian groups? Perhaps the Rhodian merchants. It could be connected with Rhodanus or the River Rhone, and probably in the letter of Hasadi, see Khazars, the people called Sheluhe Horasan Ha-So-Harim, apparently merchant envoys of Kaurasan, not very probably, are the Radinia merchant envoys of the Karusan. I think that's pronounced Karusan. The Great Khorasan is a historical eastern region in the Iranian plateau between Western and Central Asia. The Khorasan is Persian and means where the sun arrives from, or the eastern province. The name was first given to the eastern province of Persia during the Sassanid Empire. So in Ezekiel 38:39, we see Gog Magog. It says, "And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, and the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. I will turn thee back and put hooks in thy jaw, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with the sort of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them hand-wielding swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shields and helmets." Now it says down here, "After many days thou shalt be visited in the later years, thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely in them." And it says, "Thus saith the Lord God, it shall come to pass that at that time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think of an evil thought, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take spoil and to take prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations which have gotten cattle and good, that dwell in the midst of the land." It says, "Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog, Thus saith the Lord God, that in that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, thou shalt not know it. And thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding horses and great company and mighty army. And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land. It shall be in the later days, and I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me, and that I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before thy eyes." So Ezekiel was written during the time of the captivity in Babylon. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have in Revelation the dragon aligned with Gog Magog. Gog Magog is not the dragon. And we have two separate groups. The dragon is Canaanite. The dragon is Esau, because we have it associated with King Herod the Great. In Genesis, Gog Magog is related to the sons of Japheth. So the Rhone River, where these Radhanites are said to have done their trading, is a major river in France and Switzerland, arising in the Alps and flowing west and south through Lake Geneva and southeastern France before discharging into the Mediterranean Sea. The name Rhone continues the Latin Rhodanus, meaning Rhodanus name, Greek Rhodanos. In Greco-Roman geography, the Gaulish name of the river was Rhodonus or Rotonus. To run, roll, frequently found in river names. So what's interesting here, we have Occitan, also known as Lenga, Doc, by its native speakers and sometimes also referred to as provincial, is a Romance language, also Latin, spoken in southern France, Monaco, Italy's Occitan Valley, as well as Spain, Val, Adrian. Collectively, these regions are sometimes referred to as Occitania. In their language, Rhone comes from rose or rosé, borrowed from Middle Low German rose, from the Middle Dutch rose, compared to them German rose, themselves borrowing from Latin rosa. Now, this could be linked to the fact that the Greeks are said to have settled this area and started growing grapevines here. So it may be from the color of the wine. I find this really interesting that this word might be linked to a rose. So it comes from this word in Greek. Apparently it means to flow, run, or roll. What's interesting is if we look at the ancient Greek for rose, and that's this word here, from the Proto-Hellenic rodon, borrowed from the same Eastern language, most likely Old Iranian, Old Persian. The rose was native to Thrace. So Latin rosa. So this word rodon is linked to rose. So the Rhone River, although it says that it's rolling downhill, we can see that this rodon word here, Pro-Hellenic rodon, known from the Eastern language, perhaps from Old Persian, for flower or rose. We have the flower rhododendrons, and the word for them is this Greek word here again, rodon or rose. So Rhodes, the island, in Greek mythology, the name of the island derives from the nymph Rhodas, who bore 7 sons to the sun god Helios. So Rhoda, it's often a name that's used for Jewish women, Rhoda as well. Rhode was the goddess nymph and eponym of the Aegean island of Rhodes. She was a daughter of Poseidon and the wife of Helios, the sun, the island patron god. Rhode was identified by the Rhodians, with the goddess Athena and her 7 sons with Cottus. Now, it's kind of interesting is she's the daughter of Poseidon, Marinus, Rosemary. It means rose of the sea. Was she a rose? Daughter of Poseidon from the sea. Here we have an article on the red rose of Rhoda. So it goes on to say that on their sacred Isle of Rhodes, they called Rhoda and Rhodos, Halia and Helios, Kor and Koros. So she was a nymph. And it says here the word rose comes from Rhodos, and the red rose or lotus or lily can carry the same iconic and symbolic significance in every ancient tradition. The word Rhodos was called Rhodes from the prehistoric time of its creation myth and was inhabited as the sacred Isle of Helios Koros since prehistory. Continually to the present, it remains sacred to the Supreme Lord even under the Catholic Knights Templar, who held off the Muslim invaders for a long time. After the Templars were driven out, the Muslims destroyed the thousands-of-year-old religious history and culture of Rhodes, almost completely obliterating the primary evidence of the common Afro-Helleno-Semitic Bhakti yogi inheritance, whatever. Rhodos, Krishna and Radha were called Kuros and Kor, meaning virginal youths, Rhodos and Rhoda, meaning rose and red, Rohita, Nymphos and Nymphia, meaning both lotus and virgin, and Asteros and Astera, meaning star. Here we go. We're having a lot revealed about this star and the rose emblem here today. When the rose or lotus was used as the Rhodon emblem of Rhodian coins, it usually represents Rhoda because the other side of the coin, etc., had the radiant head of Helios on them. He was depicted in full iconographic form much more often than she was. She was symbolized by her flower. So here we have a coin, what looks like Helios. Then we have a rose on the other side. Helios one side, the flower, the rose on the other. This is the symbol of the island of Rhodes. Rose of Rhodes, a symbol of Rhodes Island mythological story. We have Rhodes of Africa, which is kind of interesting too. Remember in my other video how I linked the story from Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and they find the Holy Grail in Petra. And what's really interesting, I'm just linking this now, is the rose and the grail. One of the most beautiful, significant symbols of the Western mysteries is the rose. The rose and the grail share many spiritual resonances. The word chalice comes from the Latin word calyx, which means cup, and is the name given to the cup-like sepals of a flower which support the petals. Both these symbols suggest the receptive vessel of the soul, opening to receive the inpouring of divine influence. Indeed, the symbol of the rose is even more complex than the grail. So there's the goddess and the rose. The great mother goddess is symbolized by the rose and the star of the goddess as well, which is also a rosette. But also the Holy Grail represents in the Dan Brown or the mystery religion information as the family line of Jesus. Now, I don't think it means that at all. I think they're referring to, and I think Steven Spielberg is referring to, the family line of Herod, the Herodians, Herodians. Am I making too much of a leap here? You know, the rose and the chalice that's found in Petra, where Herod's mother came from. And then we have the War of the Roses. The House of Lancaster was the red rose. The House of Tudor was the combined roses, the white and the red rose. And the House of York, which was the white rose. But they're all roses. And as Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. I don't know. Does it matter what color they are? Are they from the same family line, the same chalice, the same Holy Grail? So we have to remember in the time of Herod Antipas that Judea was not Judea. It was run by the Hasmonean family, and it was Greek. It was Hellenistic. And before the Romans, Julius Caesar and the other Caesars took hold of Judah and they turned it into Judea. So Antipas grew up in a Greek Hellenized world. So he was Herod Antipas and his son was Herod the Great. I'm just wondering where the word Herod comes from, because it sounds a lot like road. Herod. Here it's saying it comes from the meaning of the word hero, meaning hero, warrior, and oldies, meaning ode or song. The name was most famously borne by Herod the Great, the 1st century BC king of Judea, which was then province of the Roman Empire.